Shane Van Gisbergen wants to go full-time Cup Series racing in 2025. Ty Dillon may be headed to College Racing in 2024, and Noah Gragson also going to be headed to Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to the video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just shove straight into those really quickly. We're going to start and talk about Riley Green, as it was announced this morning that Riley Green will do a pre-race concert at Circuit of the Americas when the Cup Series comes to Circuit of the Americas. Riley Green is one of the biggest country singers currently at the moment, so it's really awesome and cool to see that he's going to be doing a pre-race concert. I think he's going to do a very awesome and great job. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Landon Huffman. As it was announced yesterday that Landon Huffman will be joining the Wheel and Modified Tour in 2024 on a part-time basis driving for Shamrock Motorsports. Landon Huffman's pretty popular here on YouTube and has also been racing in late models for a very long time. Has won some late model races at Hickory, and I think he's going to do overall a solid and great job, and glad to see he's getting a chance and opportunity to work with Shamrock Motorsports. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Renger van der Zant and Sebastian Bourdais. As it was announced yesterday that Renger van der Zant and Sebastian Bourdais will be returning to Chip Ganassi Racing in 2024 in IMSA. Both drivers drove for Chip Ganassi Racing IMSA in 2023, and I have to say both drivers had a lot of success and they showed a lot of pace and speed, and I do believe that both drivers will have a pretty solid and good year with Chip Ganassi Racing in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Berlin Raceway. As it was confirmed over the weekend that the SRX will be returning to Berlin Raceway in 2024 on August the 1st. Berlin Raceway did host an SRX race in 2023, and it was a very solid race with awesome racing and a pretty good finish as well, with Kyle Busch picking up the victory. It's really awesome to see they're returning to the SRX is returning there, and I think you're going to see some pretty awesome and great racing once again. Short track racing has been great there, and nonetheless glad to see if they'll be returning in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Spire Motorsports. As there was a tweet that Spire put, I believe, on Friday or Saturday, that they have begun working on the new shop. Obviously, we all know at this point that Spire Motorsports has purchased Kyle Busch Motorsports, and they'll be expanding and will have 3 trucks in 2024. And they also are going to be basically going into that shop, and they've bought up KBM and they'll have 3 Cup cars in 2024. It is a shame to see that they're tearing everything down over at Spire Motorsports, but they got to do this to make it work long term. Nonetheless, it's sad to see all the KBM work gone, but it's not a major shock surprise that they're doing that, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Berry and Ryan Preece. As it was officially announced, I believe, on Saturday that Josh Berry and Ryan Preece have joined Kevin Harvick Incorporated's late model team. Josh Berry, of course, has joined Kevin Harvick Incorporated this year, as he'll be joining Stewart-Haas Racing in the 2024 season. We've already seen Josh Berry, I believe, been working with Rodney Childers in a race at the Fall Brawl this past weekend where he finished second to Cade Brown. I believe Ryan Preece will be competing with this team later this year down the road, I think at the Snowball Derby in a few weeks, so it's really good to see both drivers have joined the late model race team. I think it's pretty exciting, really awesome, and nonetheless glad to see both of them will be part of Kevin Harvick Incorporated's late model team. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Keith McGee. As it was announced over the weekend on Saturday that Keith McGee will be returning to the Rambers Racing Organization in 2024 on a part-time basis and will drive for 6 races in 2024. Keith McGee has made select starts in the Truck Series over the course of the last 2 years, and let's be honest, his starts have not been the most impressive in the world, to be fair. But I will say it's about Keith McGee. It is cool to see him getting the opportunity and chance to race. I'm not sure how he's going to be due, to be honest with you, but nonetheless, I think this is a great opportunity for him, and glad to see that he'll be returning to Ram Brothers once again in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Graham Rahal. As it was officially announced yesterday that Graham Rahal has signed a multi-year contract extension with Rahal Linderman Lanigan Racing, where he will continue driving the 15 car once again in 2024. Graham Rahal has been driving for Rahal Linderman Lanigan for many years, and at the end of 2023, this team showed a lot of pace, a lot of success, and a lot of speed on the racetrack as well. And I do believe that you're going to see Graham Rahal have overall a pretty good year next year, because I think this team's going to be better than what they were in 2023. We saw Christian Lundgaard show a ton of experience and show a lot of improvement throughout the season. Got a win at Toronto, and Graham nearly won a couple races as well in 2023. Nonetheless, awesome. I'm glad to see that Graham Rahal will be returning to Rahal Linderman Lane again in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about GM. As it was announced this morning that GM has registered as F1 power unit supplier for Andretti Global starting in 2028. This is not a surprise or shocking. Obviously, General Motors has wanted to get into Formula One. We know that Ford is getting in 2026 to work with Red Bull, but General Motors wants to get in, and the Cadillac brand is going to be working with Andretti. And it recently got approved, that being Andretti, they got approved to go to Formula One. Obviously, you have some teams and drivers that are in support. That includes Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. But you have people that are against it, like Gunther Steiner and also Toto Wolff. Andretti coming to Formula One would be absolutely huge for the growth in the United States, and I think this actually will be very successful in general for the team themselves. How are they going to do? I'm not entirely sure, but if they get people, I would imagine Colin Hurd is going to be part of the team, and also Kyle Kirkwood is likely going to be a part of the team. So nonetheless, this is really, really exciting stuff, and glad to see that General Motors is going to be getting involved and going to be in Formula One in the future. This got to get approved by the FIA. Well, they actually haven't approved. Now it's got to get into F1. I think that's going to be tough, but luckily for them, I don't think it's going to be as big of an issue as I think people are making it out to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jimmie Johnson. As Jimmie Johnson confirmed over the weekend that he will be returning once again in 2024. Now, the number of races that Jimmie Johnson will be running has not been disclosed at this point, but it's very likely he's going to run around 10 races in 2024. Now, what races could Jimmie Johnson run? Well, I think there's quite a few he could run. I would expect he'll run the 2024 Daytona 500. He'll probably run the Brickyard 400 as it does return in 2024 for the first time since 2020. He's probably going to run the Coca-Cola 600, and he also will likely run the Chicago Street Course as well. I expect Jimmie Johnson to show a lot of success in the 2024 season and have not a lot of success maybe, but I think it's cool to see he's going to be running a Toyota, which is what's really interesting is throughout his NASCAR Cup Series career, he has always run Chevys. It's going to be really interesting to see how he does with Toyota going into the 2024 season. Nonetheless, so glad to see Jimmie Johnson getting the chance and shot and opportunity to drive for his own team. Been glad to see him back in the sport, but good to see that he'll be returning in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about an EV crossover. As over the weekend, I believe on Friday, there was an image that surfaced with an EV crossover. And if you take a look at this EV crossover, this kind of looks like a little bit of different of a next-gen car. Kind of looks like some of the Mach-E's and some of the other electric cars that are coming into play. NASCAR obviously does have this, and they've said that they confirm it. They have been going to be testing this. In fact, I believe they're going to be testing it at Martinsville at the beginning of next year or late in December of this year. And this is something that's been in the works for a very, very long time. Now, obviously, they are not planning to run this in the Cup Series anytime soon. In fact, I don't think this will be in the Cup Series for the next 15 to 20 years. But I think the image is very interesting. I know a lot of people saw this. There was a lot of backlash toward this. But like I just said, there's no plans for this to be the main thing going into the Cup Series anytime soon. So nonetheless, I think it's very, very interesting. I do like it. It looks kind of cool, not going to lie. And overall, I think it's a very interesting brand. It's so cool to see this new EV crossover that's coming into play. Again, I know there was a lot of controversy around this, but luckily it won't be in the Cup Series anytime soon. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Nitro Cross. As it was announced over the weekend that Nitro Cross will compete at a NASCAR-owned track for the first time next season at Richmond, part of the deep alliance between NASCAR and Thrill 1 S&E. For those who do not know what Thrill 1 S&E is, it is owned by Dana White. And we talked about this last week, I believe on Monday, that the UFC and NASCAR have been in contact with each other, and Dana White was spotted at Phoenix Raceway having conversations with multiple NASCAR officials in regards to making some moves when it comes to Nitro Cross. I think this is really cool that they're getting involved, and I love the fact that we're going to see Nitro Cross a part of the sport in general. I think this could bring a lot of success and a lot of people in, and maybe some UFC stars will show up as well as some NASCAR events as well. And I wonder if they'll broadcast it on Fox and what other tracks they'll be basically at in the future. I think it's really cool nonetheless. I like it a lot, and it's pretty cool to honestly see that Nitro Cross and NASCAR are going to be working together. I think it's pretty fun and really awesome, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about broadcast. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern over the weekend, I believe on Saturday, that I believe Steve O'Donnell or Steve Phelps was calling out Fox Sports. And according to him, he says, one thing that we really want to focus on going forward with our broadcast partners and others is just how hard the sport really is. When someone is talking about Kyle Larson, he's able to hit his mark. What does this mean? I think this is calling out Fox Sports because it's no secret that Fox Sports' TV coverage over the course of the last few years has not been as good. NBC, they've also had their mistakes, do not get me wrong, but when you look at Fox, for instance, their coverage is not as good as NASCAR and NBC's coverage because they make a lot of mistakes. They're very inconsistent at times, and they don't do the best things in the world on the broadcast. They've done a lot of cartoon things, and it feels like that they don't take the sport as seriously as NBC does. And we found something out over the weekend as well that Jay McMurray wants to be part of the Fox Sports booth, but Fox apparently doesn't want him in there, which I really don't understand why they wouldn't want him in the booth because he brings a lot of excitement and a lot of intelligence to the booth as well. And I just think it's a little bit frustrating to see this because in my personal opinion, I think Jay McMurray should be in the Fox Sports booth. But again, Fox's coverage hasn't been as good, and they need to take it a lot seriously because they're likely going to be on the next TV contract for 2025, though announcement has not been made at this point. They're expected to be on the next TV contract going into 2025. So Fox better start doing a much better job on their TV broadcast going forward if they're going to want to stick around long term. Nonetheless, I think it's interesting to hear that they're kind of calling Fox Sports out. They need to do better. NBC can be a little more professional at times too, don't get me wrong, but Fox's coverage is just not as good, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Taylor Gray. As it was announced on Friday that Taylor Gray will be returning to Trion Garage in 2024, driving the number 17 truck once again. Taylor Gray has ran the majority of the year in 2023 with Trion Garage and has had some success so far in the 2023 season, but unfortunately was not able to make the playoffs. But I think the expectations for Taylor Gray going into the 2024 season are going to be pretty high because he is going to be driving a pretty solid team, and I expect him to have a pretty good year. And you're not going to have as much competition going into next year. You're not going to have to deal with Carson Hocevar in 2024 is moving up to Spire Motorsports, who we talk about later in this episode, by the way. And also we'll have to deal with Zane Smith going into the 2024 season, as Zane Smith is, of course, moving up to the NASCAR Cup Series to drive for Spire/Trackhouse Racing going into the 2024 season. And there are other drivers they're not going to worry about as well. Haley Deegan's-Amondo, she's moving up to AM Racing in 2024. And there are going to be some more movement. Now, of course, he'll have to deal with Christian Eckes next year, Cory, Heim, and even his other teammates like his brother Taylor, and also, of course, Dean Thompson as well. Which that also another thing as well, you've got 4 people confirmed at Trion Garage. You got Dean Thompson returning the 5 truck next year. You've got Taylor staying the 17, Tanner staying the 15 truck, and of course you also have Cory Heim returning the 11 truck next year. My big question is what happens at that 1 truck going to 2024 because nothing has been announced in regards to that 4 truck, the other truck, the 1 truck for 2024. Tony Breider's name has been linked in the conversations essentially for that ride, but I don't know if she is going to end up there. So we'll see what happens in regards to who goes there next year. But it is good to see Taylor Gray returning. The goal for Taylor Gray going into 2024, in my opinion, is he does have to make the playoffs. Luckily for him, I think he's got a really good opportunity and a really good shot to make the playoffs in 2024. But we'll see how he ends up doing going into the 2024 NASCAR Truck Series season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Roger Carruth. As we kind of talked about this last week, I believe, on Monday, but Roger Carruth kind of revealed that he is close to announcing his 2024 plans. He has spoken about progress over the weekend, and he basically kind of revealed that he's likely going to be returning to the Truck Series in 2024. Roger Carruth ran full-time in the Truck Series in 2023, but also competed part-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series as well for Alpha Prime Racing, and did try for Hendrick Motorsports as well. Now, in the Truck Series, he didn't have the greatest stats in the world. He only got 4 top 10s this year, but he had decent rookie numbers. I think finished 16th or 17th in the standings. To his credit, though, he did have some solid and pretty good runs in 2023. And I had a chance to win a couple races. I go back to Darlington earlier in the year, and Kansas had some good pace and speed before getting in a wreck with Ty Majeski, and also showed some pace at other tracks like North Wilkes, among other things as well. Now, where's Roger Carruth going to end up driving in 2024? My best guess is Roger Carruth is going to end up at Spire Motorsports. Spire Motorsports has not announced their plans or intentions for 2024, but his name has been linked to the conversations with Spire Motorsports at this point. So I'm thinking there's a good chance and possibility that we see Roger go there. He could go to Nice Motorsports in 2024. It is certainly possible, and that would be a pretty good team to go to. But I think there's a good chance Lawless Allen could go back there next year in 2024. I've seen CR7 Motorsports mentioned, but Grant Enfinger's heavily linked over at CR7 for 2024. So I'm going to say this right now. I think Roger Krug is going to go to Spire Motorsports in 2024. Nonetheless, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to that. And like I said, I think Roger Krug has a lot of talent, and I think he'll have a decent year in 2024. Hopefully he can have a good year, prove himself, have a solid run on the racetrack, but it's good to see that at least he will be somewhere in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ben Basore. As it was officially announced yesterday that Ben Basore will crew chief for John Hunter Nemechek starting in 2024 at the number 42 car for Legacy Motor Club. It was already confirmed a few months ago that John Hunter Nemechek move up to the NASCAR Cup Series in 2024 with Legacy Motor Club taking over the 42 car for Noah Gragson. And not a major shock surprise to see Ben Basore moving up. Now, Ben Basore has been in the NASCAR Cup Series before. He was there back, I think, in 2021 and 2022 with Kyle Busch. But his stats were not that great with Kyle Busch, let's be honest. Ben Basore, unfortunately, only had 3 wins with Kyle Busch, though I will say Kyle Busch was also struggling before that, as well as Adam Sims at the end. So I don't think Ben Basore has been the greatest crew chief in the world. Kyle Busch did not completely help that cause either and didn't have the greatest performances in the world. I will say, though, that this move is going to be, I think, good for it because they've had a good relationship working together at Xfinity. They had a really solid year, like I said, in the NASCAR Xfinity Series where they scored 7 victories. I think you're going to see a decent year for this team. I think John Hunter does have a lot of talent, and I think he can get the best out of equipment for sure. Now, I don't think they're going to win because I don't think Legacy is going to win next year. But I still, like I said, think this is going to be a pretty good year for Ben Basore going into the 2024 season. And like I said, I'm looking forward to see these guys work together. So excited to see them have the opportunity chance to work together going into 2024. I think expectations are going to be decent, but pretty cool nonetheless. See that Ben Basore is going to be once again returning and working with John Hunter. And we've seen this have worked before too. Now, what happens to Luke Lambert? I think Luke Lambert's going to be working with Noah Gragson at SHR. While it's not been officially announced, Noah Gragson is likely headed to Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024. So some pretty good stuff right there. And nonetheless, it sounds like we'll be finding out those drivers' futures in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carson Hocevar. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series Championship race at Phoenix, you saw what happened between Carson Hocevar and Cory Heim. And we all know how big of a disaster this race was. Well, with around 30 laps ago, the disaster began when Carson Hocevar would get into the back of Cory Heim and intentionally wreck him and spin him out. And Cory Heim then went on the radio, said, I'm going to go get him. And Cory would get back and retaliate against him with 4 or 5 laps to go. Before that, though, when Carson had got into the back of Cory Heim, Carson was really frustrated with himself, and he continued to be frustrated himself throughout the rest of the race. Now, there were many drivers in the industry that said that Carson Hocevar was putting on an act and putting on a show and was not being real and was being fake with the way he was acting, because a lot of drivers have felt like that Carson Hocevar has done this kind of stuff before, the same song and dance, and then he's gone and done the same stuff over and over again. Well, Carson Hocevar basically kind of reflected on the situation on Sirius and NASCAR Radio a couple days ago, and he says that they can believe what they want, but he says he was not acting at Phoenix Raceway, and he was frustrated at times, and he is still frustrated with the way he acted on the racetrack, which I want to say this right now. I actually do believe Carson Hocevar. I do believe that Carson Hocevar did not want to wreck Cory Heim. He meant to get into him for sure, but I don't think he wanted to wreck him. That being said, he absolutely made 100% a mistake on the racetrack and should not have gotten into Cory Heim. Because again, Carson Hocevar, I think until that Phoenix race, had been showing a lot of improvement on the racetrack, not getting into people, and was racing a lot more cleanly and a lot more respectfully. But unfortunately for Carson Hocevar, he just did this and kind of set himself square back to zero. And I am really worried about Carson going into the Cup Series next year. I feel like he's going to be in for a rude awakening in 2024, because I don't think a lot of people are going to put up with that kind of stuff. And a lot of Cup drivers saw that, and they were not very happy with him. And I don't blame them for not being happy with him, because it doesn't surprise or shock me they were pissed at him for the way he raced and affected the outcome of the championship. So, in my honest opinion, I think Carson is remorseful. I think he actually is truly sorry for what he did, but he's got to clean up that act. He's going cup racing next year in 2024 with Spire. He's got a lot of talent, but he's got a lot of enemies on the racetrack already. He's had issues with Ty Gibbs already in the Cup Series this year, so hopefully he can clean that up going into 2024, but I'm worried he's going to be in for, unfortunately, a rude awakening in the 2024 NASCAR season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carl Edwards. Now, there was a tweet that I think that went out from Reed Timmer at the Aerial Recovery Gal, and Carl Edwards was spotted at that Aerial Recovery Gal. Now, why do I talk about this? Well, Aerial Recovery is actually a sponsor for Trackhouse Racing. First of all, it's really cool to see that Carl Edwards is still interested in being around the sport in some capacity. We've actually seen Carl Edwards around the sport a lot more in the last year. You go back to some other times where Carl Edwards is around. He's actually at Darlington Raceway, did some commentary on Fox Sports, and he showed some interest maybe to do a one-off, and also said at Nashville Super Speedway not that long ago that he's interested in potentially doing a one-off in this sport. But you have to be very committed to that said one-off. I really hope Carl Edwards does, in fact, come back for a one-off in this sport because it would provide a lot of closure for a lot of fans, including myself. The last time Carl Edwards competed in the NASCAR Cup Series was in 2016 at Homestead Miami Speedway. And I have to say that I think Carl Edwards would still be pretty competitive. Yes, I know it's been a long time since he has competed. Like I said, 2016 was the last time he raced. But I believe Carl Edwards would be extremely competitive behind the wheel. Now, if Carl Edwards was returned, what teams would he end up driving for? Well, there's only two teams that I think he's going to drive for. The first one would be 23XI Racing. Carl Edwards apparently has been doing some sim work for 23XI Racing, helped a lot when it comes to the Chicago Street Course, getting everything prepared there. Denny Hamlin said that on his Action Detrimental podcast, I think back in June or July. And also, with Denny Hamlin said that he actually offered Carl Edwards an opportunity chance to maybe do a one-off with 23XI Racing. So that certainly is a potential possibility that he could drive for that organization. The other organization he drives for is Trackhouse Racing. Carl Edwards has been involved with Trackhouse in some sort of capacity. He was actually spotted, I think, at their team. He said was there and did some visiting at the Trackhouse Racing shop when they first opened up. And that was the first team that he mentioned as well because he's a big fan of Justin Marks. Also, like I said, it's Aerial Recovery Gal. They are a new sponsor of Trackhouse Racing, so this would be the other team that he would end up driving for. Now, do I actually think Carl Edwards is going to return? There's a possibility. I could definitely see Carl Edwards coming back to do a one-off. I think the chances could be very slim of him maybe coming back and doing a one-off. But I think a lot of fans like myself want that closure with Carl Edwards, and I really do hope and pray he does make a one-off return. We'll see what happens if he ends up doing it, but it's cool to see that Carl Edwards is active in around the sport in some sort of capacity with sponsors, and hopefully he does return in the not-so-distant future. If he returns, I think it'll be 23XI Racing or with Trackhouse Racing. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kevin Harvick. Now, Kevin Harvick was recently on the Dale Jr. Down this past Wednesday, and he basically revealed that he's completely done racing in the Cup Series, and he will never race in the Cup Series again. He kind of revealed that he didn't want to run around in 30th position and doesn't want to run near the back of the pack in a back pack car. Kind of like Ryan Newman did this year, where Ryan Newman struggled with Rick Ware Racing. There's something very interesting that Kevin Harvick brought up on that, and he says he's not ruling out the possibility of maybe coming back and doing a one-off in the Truck Series or the Xfinity Series as well. Now, he did say that if he does run, it would have to be a little bit later in the year because he's going to have a lot of commitments to Fox Sports. Remember, Kevin Harvick is going to be joining the Fox Sports booth in 2024. He'll be with Mike Joy and Clint Boyer in the Fox Sports booth in the Cup Series. So he's going to be fully committed to the Fox Sports booth. But he could run in the second half year a one-off or a couple starts in the Truck and Xfinity Series. Now, Kevin Harvick has not competed in the NASCAR Xfinity Series since 2018. The last race he drove was that race at Darlington where he and Ross Chastain got into some beef when he drove, I believe it was a 98 car. Funny thing now, that sponsorship is the Busch Beer sponsorship that Kevin Harvick had is, of course, going to work with Ross Chastain in 2024. So he would be in the Xfinity Series for the first time in a long time to return. When you talk about the Truck Series, though, the last time Kevin Harvick competed in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series was all the way back, I think, in 2013 when he drove for NTS Motorsports in the number 14 truck organization where he got into some beef with Ty Dillon, and then he called out Richard Childress and called out both of the grandsons, that being Austin and Ty Dillon. He said that's the main reason why he's leaving Richard Childress, because he feels like he gets no respect over at Richard Childress Racing, despite everything he's done for the team at the time back in 2013. he was let go of the organization and left to join Stewart-Haas Racing and went on to win his first championship there. Now, if Kevin Harvick was to return, what teams could he drive for? Well, obviously, he could drive for Junior Motorsports in the 88 team. We've seen Kevin Harvick drive for that organization in the past. When he was driving for Stewart-Haas Racing, they were a Chevy organization. I could see him driving the 88 car for Junior Motorsports, perhaps. I also could see him driving for Stewart-Haas Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Stewart-Haas Racing does have 2 full-time cars. We know that Cole Custer and Riley Herbst are going to be returning next year to that organization, Riley in the 98 and Cole in the 00. But he could go to a third car, maybe like the 41, like they have in the Cup Series of Ryan Preece in the 41 car. They could see the 41 return to Xfinity and Kevin Harvick go there. I could also see him going to AM Racing in that second car. They're expected to span to 2 cars. Haley Deegan's going to be the 15 car. We don't know if Brett Moffitt is going to be returning to AM Racing in 2024. There has been some indication he could, but he also go to front row next year. And I also could see him going there. As for the Truck Series, I could see Kevin Harvick going to a bunch of different teams. I could see him going to ThorSport, perhaps. I could see him going to other organizations. Maybe he goes back into Chevy stable. Or maybe he brings Kevin Harvick Incorporated back and has him and Lane Race driving. That could be a certain possibility for sure. But nonetheless, it's cool to see that Kevin Harvick is not completely done and may want to come back and race in the sport in the future. I think Kevin Harvick would be very, very successful if he did return. And in the Truck Series, he hasn't been in a long time. And maybe he could teach a lot of these guys in the Truck Series a thing or two about respect on the racetracks. There certainly wasn't a lot of respect on the racetrack in the Truck Series this year. So nonetheless, I hope Kevin Harvick does maybe return in the not so distant future to the Truck Series, and maybe does a one-off there, maybe in 2024 in Xfinity or Trucks. So we'll see what happens, though, in regards to that. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 3 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Kaulig Racing. Now, yesterday in the middle to late afternoon, Chris Rice put out a teaser tweet in regards to a potential announcement with Kaulig Racing. And he kind of teased, maybe saying that there could be an announcement on Thursday, the 16th of November, with the 11 and 16 NASCAR Xfinity Series cars. Kaulig Racing has not announced their NASCAR Xfinity Series program at this point for 2024. There has been a lot of indication that AJ Allmendinger may be returning to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024 because it does sound like that Ty Dillon is going to be going full-time in the Cup Series in the number 16 car in the 2024 season. But none of the Kaulig Xfinity Series rides have been filled up at this point. The 10 car, which is driven by Daniel Hemrick, we know Daniel Hemrick is moving up to the Cup Series with Kaulig Racing in the number 31 car next year. And we know Chandler Smith is no longer going to be driving with this team in 2024, as Chandler Smith is expected to join Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024 and have Sheldon Creed as a teammate. He's also now returned to RCR. Sheldon Creed is going to be teammates with Chandler Smith at Joe Gibbs Racing. So there's 3 rides that are currently available for them. Now, they may bring the All-Star car back, and I'm thinking that could be where Shane Van Gisbergen goes on a part-time basis. Guys like Kyle Busch, Kyle Larson go to that All-Star car like they had in 2023. They could be there in 2024. But what happens to the other 2 rides? Well, I expect AJ Allmendinger to take one of those seats in 2024, considering AJ is going to be for sure with Kaulig. We just don't know if he's going to be in the Xfinity Series or the Cup Series, but a lot of the indication has stated that he's going to be in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024, and I'll be honest, AJ is going to have a lot more success in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and Cup, though I will say he's a much better driver for the Cup Series than the guy that we'll talk about here in just a little bit. As for the 11 car, I think there's a lot of potential possibilities. There's a lot of drivers who I think are in the running. You have Lane Riggs. Lane Riggs has not announced his plans for 2024 yet, but he does have some sponsorship funding. He does have work with Kevin Harvick Incorporated, so I could definitely see him going there in 2024. You also do have Derek Kraus. Derek Kraus has not announced anything for 2024. There has been some rumors he could go there in 2024. And Derek had some solid runs this year with Kaulig Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Though I could also see Derek Kraus potentially perhaps going down to the Truck Series once again with a team like Spire Motorsports. That is certainly an option, a possibility as well. Another driver is Matt DiBenedetto. Matt DiBenedetto has not announced anything for 2024. He is still working on his plans. Apparently, he does have partners. He revealed, I think, 2 weeks ago after the Martinsville Xfinity Series race that he is working on his 2024 plans. I think Matt DiBenedetto, if he was to go to Kaulig Racing, I'm not saying he is, but if he was to go to Kaulig Racing in 2024, I think he would do overall a pretty decent job and would get the best out of that equipment for sure. He wouldn't be as good as AJ Allmendinger. I think Allmendinger is a better driver than Matt DiBenedetto, but certainly DiBenedetto would probably do an overall decent and a good job. And I think about other candidates, maybe like a Josh Williams perhaps, that could go there, something along those lines. There's a lot of potential possibilities going to 2024, and certainly a lot of big movement that could be happening here in the NASCAR silly season. There's a lot of teams making moves, and Kaulig's about to make some moves for 2024. We've been kind of waiting on what their Cup plans are for that 16 car, but it sounds like we may be finally knowing that here in the coming days. And I can't wait to see what Kaulig Racing does, at least their Xfinity Series program. We'll see what they end up doing, but nonetheless, there's some big movement happening for Kaulig Racing NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024. We'll wait to see what happens in regards to that, but they've got some movement coming in 2024 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series coming relatively soon. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story in today's episode as we're talking about silly season. Now, this is a little bit of a silly season checkup in regards to what is happening in the Cup Series silly season. Now, currently at the moment, there's 3 cars that are left available in the Cup Series. You have the 10 car for Stewart-Haas Racing. We know Eric Almirola is not returning that car in 2024. You have the 16 car that is still technically available. We know that AJ is likely to return to the Xfinity Series. And you have the 15 car for Raceway Racing that is still available as well. So let's talk about who potentially could go to these rides in 2024. Let's begin with the easy one, the 15 car for Raceway Racing. A lot of indication right now is that there are going to be multiple different drivers who are going to drive the seat in 2024. Let's talk about potential candidates for that car. So you have a lot of drivers in the Ford camp and Xfinity. First, you have Cole Custer. I think Cole Custer is going to drive the seat because he drove for Raceway Racing, I think, in maybe 1 or 2 starts earlier this year. Drove the 51 for 3 straight races at Atlanta, New Hampshire. And I think also before that, another track as well. Cole Custer has some decent runs, and I think he would be a pretty good candidate for that seat as well. Then you have Riley Herbst. Riley Herbst, as we know, he's going to be back in the Xfinity Series next year. And he made some starts at Raceway last year as well. I think he's got a good opportunity and chance to drive for this team as well. I also think J.J. Yeley will be in this car for quite a few races. He has also not announced his 2024 plans, but I think J.J. Yeley has a great chance and possibility to get in the seat. I also mentioned Haley Deegan as well, because I think she could be part-time with this team in Cup. I wouldn't be surprised if Ford wants to move her up to see how she can do. She's going to be in the Xfinity Series full-time for the next 2 years, but if Ford might give her an opportunity and chance to make her debut, since she's higher up in the Ford camp as well. So that's the easy one there. I think there's going to be multiple drivers in that 15. Let's talk about 10 car for Stewart-Haas Racing. So, it's expected right now that Noah Gragson is likely going to the 10 car in 2024. Now, Noah Gragson got kicked out of Legacy Motor Club early. He had those issues early in the year. And let's be honest, his time at Legacy Motor Club was not the greatest in the world. He only scored 2 top 20 finishes in 2023. We also, after he left, the team seemed to show some improvement. And if Noah Gragson is truly going to Stewart-Haas Racing next year, I think he's going to have a little bit of struggles because, let's be honest, SHR, they're not the fastest organization in the world currently at the moment, and they showed some struggles near the end of the season. I think Noah Gragson is a good driver, don't get me wrong, but I have a really bad feeling that Noah Gragson is likely going to be the weakest driver at Stewart-Haas Racing next year, simply because of the issues that team has faced. So I am worried about Noah Gragson. He's the favorite for the 10 right now. And he also does bring a little sponsorship funding, which helps as well why he likely will go there, because he does bring sponsorship from companies like Bass Pro Shops and Black Rifle Coffee as well. So that's another big reason why he's likely headed over there in 2024. There's going to be some struggles, though. He's probably going to be last on the totem pole. And I think he needs to show some improvement because he's getting an opportunity here. Likely, he'll be headed over there to SHR in 2024. Finally, the 16 car, and this is the main focus. Ty Dillon. Ty Dillon right now is the current favorite to take over the 16 car going into 2024. We obviously know he's not returned to Spire Motorsports in the 2024 season, as that will be taken over from Carson Hocevar, who's taking his 77 car in 2024. I'm going to be real on Ty Dillon. I really don't think Ty Dillon deserves this seat. He's not really done anything in the Cup Series in his career, and he was out of the Cup Series just not that long ago, drove part-time for Joe Gibbs Racing, did not have a lot of good runs with JGR. And I don't think he's going to do much. Let's be honest with ourselves. AJ Allmendinger deserves 16 car a lot more, right? He absolutely does. However, the biggest issue is the sponsorship and funding. Ty Dillon, whether we like it or not, brings a ton of sponsorship and funding. And Kaulig Racing is tired. I think Matt Kaulig is tired of paying out of pocket. And I really don't blame him for that. I don't blame him for not wanting to continue paying out of pocket because it does cost a lot of money, especially how much charters are at the moment, being like $30, $40 million at this point. I don't blame him for not wanting to pay out of pocket anymore. It's just disappointing to see that they got to focus on sponsorship and funding now. Maybe they should not have expanded 2 cars as quick as they did. But Dale Jr. kind of teased that Ty Dillon's likely going there. So at this point, I think Ty Dillon is likely headed to 16 Cup car for Kaulig Racing in 2024. And he's probably going to bring some sponsorship and funding with him as well going into 2024. We'll see what happens though, but it sounds like we will know who's in that car in the not-so-distant future for 2024 with that team. So it sounds like Ty Dillon's likely going to Kaulig, but nothing is officially confirmed at this point. But announcement's probably, again, I think announcement is coming not so far down the road with Ty Dillon in the 16, but it sounds like Ty Dillon more than likely will be in the 16 car for Kaulig Racing in the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, Adam Stern put out a tweet and was quoting an article from Speed Cafe talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. And we obviously know Shane Van Gisbergen is going to have a development deal with Trackhouse Racing in 2024. He's going to run the Cup Series on a part-time basis, the Xfinity Series on a part-time basis, and the Truck Series on a part-time basis as well. Now, Shane Van Gisbergen is expected around 20 to 25 NASCAR races in 2024. A lot of people believe he's going to be mainly focused on racing the Xfinity Series in 2024. Now, what teams could SVG drive for? He's obviously going to drive for Trackhouse Racing, probably that Project 91 car that he drove. And he did have to already make 2 starts in the Cup Series, got 2 top 10s, both of them on road courses, which is the first time we've seen that since 1978, which I think is very, very impressive, by the way. As for when it comes to SVG and Xfinity, I think he's going to be with Kaulig Racing in their 10 car. That car, they have an alliance, of course, with Trackhouse Racing. We saw Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez drive for them earlier this year. So I would imagine you're going to see them end up being in that seat. You also go to Spire's Xfinity program. He could go there as well. Spire now has a big alliance with Trackhouse, so I could see him going there as well. As for the Truck Series, I think he goes Spire Motorsports, the car that Kyle Busch is driving. I think that's the one he's going to end up driving for in 2024. But something noted and interesting noted is that Shane Van Gisbergen is wanting to go full-time Cup Series racing in 2025. Now, obviously, that is going to be with Trackhouse Racing if he is to go full-time. Now, I think that Shane Van Gisbergen will have a decent and solid year with Trackhouse Racing in the Cup Series, and also I think it will do decent on ovals. The main reason why he's running the Xfinity Series and Truck Series is to get better on the ovals, because he's probably going to focus on road courses in Cup, run all the road course races there, and probably run all of his oval races in the Xfinity Series and Truck Series. Now, he did make his oval debut earlier this year, and I have to say he did overall a solid and good job in that debut, I believe finishing in the top 20 with Nice Motorsports, and had a lot of fun racing in that event as well. As for my expectations for SVG, I think he'll do good there. But again, you go back to 2025, right? He wants to go full-time. Here's the issue for Trackhouse Racing. You have 4 drivers fighting for potentially 2 or even 3 seats. Because not just Shane Van Gisbergen fighting for a seat, you got Zane Smith as well. Zane Smith's joining Trackhouse/Spire, and he's being leased out to Spire Motorsports in 2024. So that's another thing, a wrinkle in this situation as well. Now, Trackhouse, I think, could easily take that third charter away from Spire Motorsports and move Zane Smith in-house. So there's the thing, because Ross Chastain, he's not going anywhere. Ross Chastain's won 4 races the last 2 years, and I expect Ross Chastain to be a championship threat. Daniel Suarez is the one I'm really focusing on, because while I did predict yesterday that he was going to be returning to Trackhouse in 2025, if he does not run well enough in 2024, there's a really good chance and possibility that Daniel Suarez could not only be on the chopping block, but his seat could be really wide open, especially if Shane Van Gisbergen and Zane Smith both do really well next year. And I expect Zane Smith to be the best performer at Spire next year, because he's going to be getting a lot of support from Trackhouse Racing next year. I really worry about Daniel Suarez, because let's be honest, Daniel Suarez has been at Trackhouse Racing now for 3 seasons, and let's be real with ourselves, he hasn't really shown the greatest performance out on the racetrack the last few years. Again, he did win last year and had a chance to make the round of 8 and only missed the round of 8 because of lack of power steering. Now, one thing that could help Daniel Suarez stay at Trackhouse Racing is he does have sponsorship and funding that he brings in, ComScope, among other companies that work with him, but they're bringing a lot more sponsors quickly, and I don't need as much sponsorship as other organizations do. So at this particular point, I really don't know what Trackhouse is going to do. I think they're in a pretty big pickle right now, because Shane wants to go full-time, and I think he's going to go full-time because he's really, really good, and I think he's going to learn really, really quickly. So I think Daniel Suarez is on the chopping block going into next year if he does not step up to the plate. because I think Zane Smith will be integrated in the Trackhouse family, and I think both Zane and Shane are going to both be really good next year. So I think 2025 is going to be very interesting to see how things go down. Like I said, I expect Shane Van Gisbergen to be a full-time Cup Series driver in the 2024 season, 25 season, I should say, because I think he's going to do good on the oval track. So we'll see what happens, but Shane Van Gisbergen is heavily favored, and I think he will be pretty good in Cup in 2025 if he does go full-time. So, that is for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Links go below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. Do you think Shane Van Gisbergen goes full-time in 2025? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think Ty Dillon goes 16 and Noah Gragson goes to the 10? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we're having Hendrick Motorsports team preview dropping on the channel. Thursday, there may be another team preview and also that colleague announcing, but I talk about that as well. Friday is going to be an NASCAR news video. Saturday will be playoff predictions, and Sunday will be the Cup Series predictions on the channel as well. I got a lot of great content dropping on the channel that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.